Security guards, what's your creepiest/scariest story? NSFW. I've worked security on and off for several years to supplement my income, so I've heard quite a few creepy stories from coworkers. Probably the most legitimately scary story I've heard was from a guard that was working in a closed-down arena. The building is more than 100 years old but hasn't been used since the early 2000s. The city is keeping up with basic maintenance as it waits for a buyer. There's usually one guard assigned to the building. It's a 6,000-seat arena with a huge basement and 2 additional floors that have lots of old office spaces, dressing rooms and a separate, smaller community theater-type stage that's upstairs. The usual guard is doing his rounds through the building. The building itself is very interesting, as it's largely unchanged since the heydays of the 70s and 80s. The upper floors are largely dark and are pretty creepy. Anyway, the guard is doing his normal rounds but feels unnaturally creeped out. It's his normal post but something feels different today. He's feeling jumpy but shakes it off and continues. He's a very diligent guy, so he walks every floor of the building. He's in the very top of the catwalk system above the main arena where the old spotlighting equipment was. It's a narrow wooden catwalk system. Suddenly he hears a loud creak behind him, like someone is walking. He spins around and sees a guy standing there. The guy's is frozen mid-stride like he's been tiptoeing up behind him. Guy has an unsettling mischievous-looking smile on his face like he's been caught with his hand in a cookie jar. Dude has a big steel pipe in his hand instead of a cookie though. Guard pulls his gun and guy takes off running in the opposite direction and disappears into the labyrinth of the building. Cops come and sweep the building with a canine but don't find him. They do find that he's been playing in the dust that's on top of the old concession counters. He had written a bunch of bizarre helter-skelter type unsettling rhymes and drew a bunch of stick figures hanging from nooses. The speculation is it was some crazy homeless guy that had been hiding in the building a few days and had made a game of following the guards without them knowing it. I saw the writing still on the counters the last time I was there. Used to work at a hospital that was mainly used for mental health. It had fully secured floors and it was our job to control combative patients. Many patients were waiting for felony trials, so lots of stories. The worst was we did a welfare check on a vehicle in our ER parking lot. They had been sitting there around an hour or so. The guy inside the car wasn't responding to our attempts to get his attention. Open his car door up and he was trying to dig his own foot off with a flathead screwdriver. He had gotten all the way down to the ankle bones on one whole side. We had to wrestle him into the ER as he was on a ton of meth. Seeing the ankle like that in the guy's almost feral-like state was like something out of a zombie movie. About 15 years ago, I was a guard at a pastry manufacturing plant. At night it was a cold, creepy place filled with weird machinery and is very much in a really bad part of town. There was a catwalk above some machines that lead to offices, with a long metal staircase. Around the beginning of this staircase was a metal cage with a gate I had the key to. Nobody else was there. Up on the catwalk there were hooks with lab coats, 3 coats with 5 hooks. All were hung on the side where the catwalk met the stairs, so the far 2 hooks were empty. After I made my round this night I came back and noticed one coat moved from the middle hook to the far hook. I unlocked the gate, closed and locked it behind me to check the offices. This was about 8 p.m. and the last of the employees had left, but I figured maybe one returned. Catwalk was empty, and so are the offices. There was no other way down. So now I'm a little freaked out, but I figure it's just my mind. So I go back down, lock the gate, and head to the lounge area. The next round is done and the coats are moved, each hanging on an alternating hook. Now I'm a little pissed thinking someone is definitely messing with me. Back up to the catwalk. Empty. Check the offices. Empty. Lock the gate and check the back and front doors, they are all locked shut. Alarm is on. I go back to the lounge and lock myself in there. Fuck whatever was going on. Check the monitors we had, nothing. Every time I did a round, the coats changed. I actually stopped doing rounds, and figured if they want to fire me, I don't care. I got a new assignment after that and never went back. I asked other guards who had that assignment and was told that weird things did indeed happen there with no explanation. I am not and never been a security guard, but I remember one time. I was closing the store with my boss, we locked the front door as we closed and cleaned. This was late at night. Well, near my end our shift, we heard scratching at our store's front door. It is a glass door, automatic slider, but as I said, it was locked. We originally shrugged it off as I'm animal or tweaker, that was until we finished cleaning. My manager heard scratching at the back door, but it can't be opened from the outside. Someone or something was trying to get in, the scratching was violent and near the lower part of the door. He was back there finishing up an inventory check as it all happened. He shouted at whoever it was. Basically, leave or we are calling the cops stuff. The scratching stopped right after that, and he made sure the door was locked from the inside too, by procedure. Well, he also opened the door to look around. He saw no one nor anything, but claw marks where the scratching was. Animals are not uncommon in the area, but stray dogs, cats, and such. Normal stuff. These claw marks were not normal, not our normal at least. He came up front, where I was putting cleaning stuff away. I was at our main checkout area, next to the front door. Asked what happened, as he told me. We heard a loud scratching sound at the front door again. But we both turned pale as we saw a human-like hand with claws, at the door and two eyes. Reflective. I was young and actually quite strong. Manager is a shorter and smaller guy, Bi also older. He called the cops and we didn't leave till the cops were at our door. The officer escorted us to our rides, and as we left, he followed us. Even the cops saw this. As we were pulled out of the driveway in a line, we saw a human-like head, peeking at us from the bottom of building's corner. We all pulled out and stopped at a nearby gas station. Cop confirmed what we saw and he had some other cops drive by. They looked around. Despite what we saw and what cameras saw, we still don't know WTF it was. The officer is pretty sure it was a prank, because he went around the area and asked anyone with cameras facing our store. For possible footage, nothing. Used to work security in hospitals. Some were for psychiatric patients. Some for addicts. Some for the good old sick and injured. One night I was working at a hospital with psychiatry when the alarm goes off for the third floor. Big alarm. Usually for aggression. I sprinted up the stairs and came to a room with two nurses outside, sobbing and screaming. Went inside and the patient had hung herself from the open window with a belt, if I remember correctly. Could have been some bed sheets as well, it's been a while. She made sure she couldn't reach the windowsill when she hanged herself and had taken some meds to interrupt the reflex to save yourself. My first instinct was to try and lift her up. She dropped on my butt. She was very light. When she falls over my shoulder I hear a sigh, so I shout that she's still breathing. Everyone rushes in, CPR gets started and an ambulance is called to take her to a hospital with an emergency ward. She survives. Next day she trashes the emergency ward of another hospital I work at and gets kicked out, so yeah, you win some you lose some. Edit, come to think of it. Minors near the end of puberty. At the age of 15 to 18 years old. Had to restrain some of them because they were aggressive. Some of them are beasts because their hormones are all out of control. I'm not a lightweight either, so had to be careful not to hurt them without giving them room to hurt me. Hurting a minor was always bad news even if they attack you first. Not a security guard, but I used to work overnights at a dog daycare. We were cage-free, so someone had to keep an eye on the dogs 24/7. We had cameras in each room, as well as one on the front of the building, one on the side, and one overlooking the parking lot. The parking lot camera was angled just enough that you could see where the back entrance to the building was, but not the door itself. One night, the buzzer that alerts us a client has arrived went off. This alarm went off all the time during business hours, but not so much after midnight. So I looked up and saw a man walking toward the back door. I had a moment of panic trying to remember if I had locked everything or if this guy was just about to break in. After a moment, nothing happened. The man never reappeared on camera, and the back door never opened. I went back to check. I had indeed locked everything properly. I checked around the windows and saw no evidence of the man. I wanted to confirm he had left, so I went back to the camera footage to see where he might have gone and how I missed it, but I couldn't find any sign of the man reappearing. Only a few frames of him walking up to the back door, and then poof, no trace. I froze the footage on the best frame I could get of the guy, and I swear to God it was me. The clothes were my clothes. The shoes, the hat, everything. Even his hair, posture, approximate height. I obviously couldn't see his face well, but it was like seeing myself on camera. I walked up to the back door the same way I would if I was going to work, and then I disappear. Or at least that's how it looked. I'm sure it was just some guy, but where he went after walking up to the building, no idea. Lots of weird things happened on overnight shifts there, but that one sticks out in my mind as one of the more bizarre feeling moments. Oh, I got one. I got a call one night to a funeral home, multi-alarm in several rooms. Meaning several sensors were going off all over the place repeatedly. I arrive at the site and head on in. Keep in mind this is at about 2 a.m., peak haunting hours. I call the alarm monitoring company and they say the sensors are going off in the morgue. Well, ain't that just fucking dandy? So I make my way there and I find the door cracked open. I open the door and there's a corpse on the table in the middle of the room mid-embalming. I turn on the light and walk around, I see nothing. Then, when I'm on the opposite side of the room, the fucking corpse wheezes. I turn around and it's looking right at me. Panic ensues, a standing bag holder thing falls over. I'm frozen in sheer fucking terror. Then I saw something small run out the door. I reported it. We got onto the owners through their after hours number. So the story behind this was, the person doing the embalming was working late but she suddenly felt sick, too sick to work. So she left. Thing is, she felt so sick that she left the corpse on the table. Her plan was to run home, take some medicine and come back, but that didn't pan out as she wound up hunched over her toilet at home puking her guts out, and she left a window cracked open to lay the corpse smell out and didn't close it cause she was so focused on what she was doing. A couple hours after she left, a cat got in. I figure it hid from me at first, and in its escape it must have run over the corpse's chest, pushing out what air was in their lungs, making them wheeze, which must have either made their head tilt or the cat kicked it while running away and it knocked over the bag stand thing. Anyway, I covered the corpse back up, sealed the window, couldn't find any sign of the cat, so figured it got out and reset the alarm. Thankfully it didn't go off again. Not exactly a security guard but a soldier, and I don't know if that counts. But I once guarded an entrance to a military base alone maybe 3 months after I was recruited and was greeted by a bunch of wolves/hyenas or something else along the lines. It was about 1 to 2 a.m. and I started hearing a lot of noises, went to check it out with my rifle, my walkie-talkie and my flashlight. It seemed that one of the, let's call them wolves even though I'm 99% sure they weren't wolves, wolves killed the other one and then started to howl, and in seconds I started hearing howls and sound of dogs crying and yelling around me. Suddenly I see the wolf that killed the other one walking towards me and looking directly in my eyes. He wasn't alone, he walked with about 5 others all coming to me. In addition, I was surrounded but they were the only ones coming towards me. So naturally I started making noises and throwing rocks at them, but it didn't really bother them. So at one point they were way too close for comfort, so I dropped my walkie-talkie and loaded my rifle and was about to shoot. My heart was beating the fastest it ever did my whole life, and I start yelling at them and stomping the ground with hopes that maybe this time it will work, and it did, and they left. I only lasted a few months doing security at an environmental cleanup site. It was a former Cold War era Air Force radar installation thing. Everything has been razed to the ground and they were taking out contaminated soil and debris. My shift would start with me waiting around for a supervisor to pick me up and get driven 2 miles to the outpost, which was where building materials were dumped. I was basically on tweaker watch. Previously some tweakers got caught and took a beating from the sheriffs, so none were likely to try again. I'd spend most nights smoking cigs and reading from my Kindle outside. So I don't think there's little green men running around, but I definitely saw things in the sky that I would call an UFO. Sometimes you'd see 2 or 3 orbs buzzing around and blinking out as fast as they came. I told my friends and they were like, "You gotta quit this job." For 3 nights they'd show for 2 seconds and disappear. Then the motion lights would turn on and I'd get radioed to observe and report. On the 4th night when it happened and I got radioed to do a perimeter check, I radioed back that everything was clear even though I was too scared to leave. Then it happened again and faked a perimeter check. And again. A 4th time the motion lights came on but there was no radio to check on them. I tried to radio to dispatch and it was like I was muted. I started feeling ill. I realized that I had been sweating profusely and the trailer was roasting. I just thought I'd feel better if I cooled down and had a cigarette. I hurry through the trailer door and hop down the small steps, and it's like I get blasted with this burst of cold dry air and dazzling light and fainting. I wake up to the supervisor shaking my camp chair outside the trailer, calling me a bitch ass for falling asleep. I'm so disorientated and like, what the fuck just happened? I get home and take off my dickies. My knees are fucking bruised. There's no way I didn't faint. I feel physically ill and curl up on the couch. Work calls me to ask why I wrote down 3 perimeter checks when they only asked me to do 2. I had been in this trance-like state watching TV when they called, and I basically said that I need some time off cause the job is getting to me. I get called a bitch again but said to come back rested for next week. I basically shut down, and when it was time to go back I said fuck this. Still to this don't know what to believe to this day. I've been attacked enough times or had weapons flashed at me, but it ends up just being agitating rather than scary. The scary shit to y'all would be the sexual predators you never see or hear about that we deter or scoop up. That ranges from dudes that just follow women or kids around to some that take that next step. We've had dudes jacking off while watching people. One shot his cheddar on the rack of FUBU while watching some girls. That was an amusing time. Another had a swimwear fetish, just walked around with his dick out around the rack. Came running over from another store where he'd flashed some ladies then ran off. Caught him that day, and like 4 months later he was doing it at another nearby location. Latest guy had a sneaker fetish. He was sniffing, like heavily, looking for one someone tried on. And I mean he was huffing the thing against his nose and playing pocket pool. We've had dudes with selfie sticks getting upskirt shots, or dudes with mirrors on their toe tips. I get people got fetishes, but when it starts to involve staring at women and children, nah.